Okay, we'll talk a bit. Yesterday, about 9 o'clock, I think, I had clicked on RT, and it was gone. Well, what happened, when I clicked on it, all of a sudden Google Play downloaded an update. And as soon as that update was installed, you could not access RT anymore. Now, I wasn't too surprised by this. They shut down RT in Europe. The EU managed to do this. I think they did it in England. They did it in quite a few places, and they've been really trying to do it here. I think they pulled it off a lot of cable channels, that sort of thing. You could still access it to a limited extent over the internet, but Google had evidently decided to drop it. And I had read claims that they had dropped it. Though on YouTube you could still watch some of the RT stuff. But the app was no longer available in theory. But then suddenly, starting this morning now, all of a sudden RT is back. Just like it used to be. Now for you who aren't familiar with it, RT and Sputnik, they're both news media out of Russia, and you'll always see the disclaimer that they are sponsored by the Russian government and stuff, but RT's been around for a long time. I have found RT to be a very reliable news source. They're well known for this. They've won many awards for their journalism. I trust RT way more than I trust anything else out there. But at least it's a good balance. You have to have a different perspective on these things. Without RT or Sputnik being there, the rest of the news can just go wild with the propaganda, and they have been doing that. But at least if you have an alternative that can call them on it when they say outright lies or disinformation, though of course they claim that the Russian stuff is all disinformation, but they have never, they have never been able to disprove anything that RT has said. If RT reports on something, it's an honest report. People make weird claims about RT, that it's, but like I say, I have found them to be very reliable, and at least as an alternative. Like yesterday, when RT was down, these other networks, all of them, even Fox, they were just going hog wild with pure propaganda because there was nobody to call them on it. I mean, to the point it would make Goebbels blush. What they were doing was just way over the top. And the stuff that you see, like if you watch the news out of Ukraine, because there are networks that are just Ukrainian. And a lot of this stuff, it surprises me, like there'll be somebody, well, this is even, I saw on Fox, I saw a really bad example of this, or a good example of bad journalism. They were talking about, the horrors that Russia is bringing in these thermobaric bombs or missiles, or they kept calling them vacuum bombs. And there's a video playing of this, and evidently you're supposed to think that this is what the Russians are doing. But the video that they were playing was of one of these thermobaric bombs that we dropped in Afghanistan. And I'm looking at it thinking, like there's these big deserts in Ukraine. I know where that came from, that video. I have seen that before. Same when they're showing all these terrible rocket attacks, and you see all these Russian multi-barrel rocket launchers, a whole line of them, and they're just firing away like crazy. And then they cut to a clip of a missile hitting the A building someplace. And these clips of these rocket launchers, I know that's from when they were doing their drills. I mean, that was something that they were doing in order to show you the impressive ability that they had. That wasn't actually in this conflict. That was a whole separate thing. You see stuff from different countries that they're portraying as happening now, but from different countries and from years ago. And I keep expecting to see, some refugees walking, pushing a wheelbarrow with a cowl tied on behind, going past the Dutch windmill in black and white from old World War II movies. It wouldn't surprise me, but they would claim this was in Ukraine. So there's a lot of bullshit that goes on, and you need somebody to be able to call them on that. This goes on, but they keep patching together all these weird little splices, or sometimes it'll be, a missile hit on a building, which they claim is a building that it is not, and then they'll show it from like 3 different angles and claim it's 3 different buildings, and a lot of stuff going on. So you really have to watch it, and that's where it's good to have RT available, because otherwise, this whole thing, it reminds me of a remake of the Wag the Dog movie, if you've ever seen that, but a remake made by Ed Wood. If you're familiar with Ed Wood in, Plan 9 from Outer Space, where everything is made just by splicing footage together. That's what they're doing. But that's worrisome. If you have to be able to have an accurate depiction of what's going on. They tell all this monstrous tales of, purposely targeting civilian, and that it's not true. They're going to great extremes not to. And they go on and on about Kiev. Honestly, I didn't think they would really even bother with Kiev. But one of the, they because really that isn't where the troublemakers are. The troublemakers are down south, and they're kind of getting that squared away. They're making great advancements, and they're doing exactly what I thought they would do if they met resistance. They're taking the whole shoreline there, and they're linking up those provinces with Crimea, getting the water going again, and they're going to end up cutting Ukraine completely off from any water, from any sea. And that I expected, but this Kiev movement that they continually harp on, and they're bogged down, they ran out of gas, they ran out of food. No, they're biding their time there, but the whole purpose there, since that is the capital, is to change the government. Well, that's going to be, like I said when this whole thing started out, that it would be hard to take it, hard to hold it. So their theory is if we can go in and change the whole government, but anyway, it's nice to see that RT is back on there again. Because, boy, I do, when they start doing that, because I think the reason they came back is because there was quite an outcry, because it is the most watched news source on YouTube. People have faith in RT, and for good reason. Like I've always found it to be pretty darn reliable. It can't be helped that their aspect is kind of from the Russian side, but they aren't afraid to, like, say somebody was saying, well, they don't show the protests going on in Moscow. Well, they do show that. I have seen that. They're pretty solid journalists. And like I say, they've won many awards for that, and nobody has been ever able to refute anything that they've said. So they need to be there. You need to have that other view of things. So it's good to see it's back here, but like I say, it's still blocked in Europe. The EU's got that sewn up there, and it's blocked in Ukraine, so those people just got to go by what the state media tells them. And like I said, there you get your Ed Wood movie. But we'll see, you know, it'll play out, but I have seen some strong propaganda. Like say, no, they're really rather threatening some of these other countries, you know, the EU and NATO and the UN, you know, like Switzerland wanted to stay out of this. They wanted no part of this. They wanted to remain neutral. That's their whole thing. But the EU immediately started threatening to charge them with money laundering. Well, you know, they threaten to do this once in a while. So Switzerland caved in. You know, there's been several other countries. There's some that are holding, you know, trying to remain in a neutral position on this. But they really push them. There was a letter that was sent out that was particularly threatening, and then they rescinded that because it got out in the public, and they didn't want it to be public. You know, if they make threats, they want to make them in private, and this got out in the public. So then they said, "Oh, we really didn't mean it," but they meant it. I'm curious to see now. Mexico was still trying to remain neutral in this. They aren't putting on sanctions. You know, they're just trying to stay out of this. But I am sure that we are putting a lot of pressure on Mexico. But that's the game. I mean, that's how they play it. You know, and I'm not. You know, the whole thing is a horrible thing. The whole thing should have never happened. If we hadn't been so arrogant and belligerent. But that's our whole thing. You know, we won't listen to what somebody else has to say. They just completely dismissed it all these years that Russia has been trying to tell them, and many other countries and many other politicians were trying to tell them, don't be doing that. You have to leave that buffer zone. But we wouldn't listen. You know, we got to push in there, so then we get this war. And we wanted it. We wanted it really bad. And so you can't, they knew this was going to happen if they pushed it, but they pushed it. So you can't just be blaming, you know, like they say now. They could say, oh, Putin is a madman. Putin is absolutely crazy. He's insane. You know, we love to do that. We've done that all the time with different, it's always, we go after the head of the country. You know, like Saddam Hussein at one time, he was our greatest buddy. All of those people, they're just great. We put them in power, we finance them, we think they're just wonderful people, and then all sudden we decide that, no, they do something we don't like, and then they're absolutely crazy, they're a tyrant, they've been horrible all their lives. It's dangerous being, you know, exact same thing, with, you know, like Ukraine is talking, they'd really like to get into the EU, they'd really like to get into NATO. They would never survive under the pressure that NATO and the EU would put on them. They couldn't handle that. There's no way in the world. They would be chafed by it, let's say. They think they want this, but they really don't want it. They want it now, and they think it'll bail them out of this jam they're in, but there's no way that you can have the people in power that they have and survive in that environment. It just wouldn't work. Which is why they have been kept out all this time, like in the EU, where they keep trying to get into the EU, but the EU says, no, you know, that you have to straighten out your act first. And now it just got completely out of hand. But they just keep going. You know, and I see people in the comments saying the stupidest things, which is why I don't let comments open on these, because I see enough of them in other people's videos. I have no desire to see them on mine. People are so uninformed, and they live in this kind of fantasy world. You know, like this column that's sitting in there. Why don't we just go in and take them all out? You know, like they aren't protected by air cover and those S-400 air defense systems. And it's so silly to think you could just fly in there and drop bombs on them. You know, and if that wouldn't start World War III, you know, we're going to be really lucky with the amount of propaganda that's going on at the moment. We're going to be lucky if this doesn't escalate. You know, they keep saying, oh, no, 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 but boy, they keep pushing her. They could very easily go nuclear. You know, there really isn't any place else for it to go. Because I know, like now they're having more of these conferences again today. Zelensky isn't going to, you know, the Russians aren't going to back off. You can forget about that. And Zelensky, now that he's a hero and all these other countries are rooting for him, he isn't going to back down. So in the end, you know, I think there will be a Ukraine, but it'll be a lot smaller. Because these gains that Russia's making down south, they ain't likely to give them back. You know, they could let Kiev alone, and like I said, they kind of let Kiev alone. But they could. But they really want to chop the head off this snake. And I see their point, but well, I'm glad to see RT is back. That's the main thing I want to see, is RT is back. And really watch the bullshit that's going on. I have never seen that much propaganda. I mean, we're notorious for that. We always have been. We're worse than like Germany or any of them have ever been. America is great on propaganda. I mean, this was well established, especially like during World War II. It just, now, is just to the maximum, to the point, like I said, where it almost gets ridiculous. You know, like, what does, somebody made a comment that he had watched the video. That was a Fox video too, and he said, it was just a simple comment, I doubt the veracity of this reporting. And that's what you should do. You should doubt when you see something that kind of makes you think, what? You know, doubt what they're saying. Because a lot of times what they're saying is just pure bullshit. And if you look into it, you will find that. But without the ability to look at all the information, you're going to just accept this line of bullshit. And I'm afraid that's what people are doing. Yeah, well. I think I'm relatively safe here, but boy, I hate to see foolishness like that go on. It's very frustrating, actually, to watch some of this news, what they claim to be news, and just to watch the deception that's going on. And nobody calling them on it. That's why we got to have something like RT. Though I know, I mean, a lot of people, oh, RT ain't that communist. Well, it isn't. You know, it's a very well established and very well regarded news organization. It was funny because I was watching even yesterday. I saw, when I hadn't quite figured out what went on with RT yet, and then I was watching Ron Paul's Liberty Report, and he mentioned in that, he got up this morning and he clicked on RT and it wasn't there. Well, because people like Ron Paul have been on RT. They have done talks on RT. In fact, there are, I don't think it's on RT. I'm trying to think. This, I think, is on one of the German channels, but there is a talk, or kind of a question and answer with Lavrov, the foreign minister out of Russia, who is a very smart and articulate guy. But that's very informative, and if you can find that, it's like an hour long. But there again, I mean, he's like Putin, where they can talk for an hour without notes, without having to read a teleprompter, just taking questions from this reporter and answering them. But that would enlighten you a lot. But if you don't care to be enlightened, I guess that's your problem. You can take what they're giving you if that makes you happy, but you really should be looking a little further.